The city of Anno's prime glittered like a jewel under the pale blue sun, its rings of concentric districts stretching outward like ripples in water. From above, it looked like perfection. From the ground, it felt like a cage. Jake Mercer adjusted the strap of his battered duffel bag as he trudged toward the border checkpoint. The bag weighed on his shoulder, filled with fragile crates of medical supplies, each sealed with Earth Defense Corps insignia long since scratched away. He had carried heavier loads during his years in uniform, but the weight of these supplies was different. They weren't weapons. They weren't rations. They were medicine for children. Children who wouldn't survive the week without him. Another day in paradise, he muttered to himself, though his eyes never left the towering barrier of steel and energy ahead. The checkpoint loomed like a fortress, its smooth surfaces alive with pulsing neon veins of alien design. Blue force fields shimmered between armored pylons. Towers bristled with sensor arrays that could detect a lie in your heartbeat or a microgram of contraband hidden beneath your fingernail. Humans were not welcome here. Jake knew that before he ever set foot on Anno's, but he also knew this delivery mattered more than his comfort. The children in Central District Hospital, alien or not, were victims of the same war that had carved scars across his soul. And maybe, just maybe, saving them could help him feel less like a relic of violence and more like a man. The line shuffled forward. Traders from the outer rings argued in harsh tones, flashing papers at bored guards. A family of pale green scalens clutched one another nervously as they were waved through. The closer Jake got, the more his jaw tightened. That was when he saw her. Officer Kiara Nix. Her nameplate gleamed like polished silver against the matte black of her uniform. Her skin, an almost luminescent blue, caught the artificial lights with an unearthly sheen. Pale markings rippled faintly across her cheeks, a biological quirk of her species that mirrored her emotions, though her rigid expression revealed nothing. Her silver-white hair was bound tight, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face, the long ears that flicked with alertness, and the precise, unyielding stance of someone who believed in order above all else. Jake's boots scuffed the polished floor as he approached her station. She didn't smile, she didn't even blink. "Identification and purpose of visit," she said, her voice cold, musical, and dismissive all at once. Jake slid his interplanetary ID across the console. "Jake Mercer, Earth citizen, humanitarian courier. I've got medical supplies for Central District Hospital, Children's Ward, authorized by Dr. Renick." Her long fingers, one joint more than his, tapped at her console. The screen reflected in her pale eyes as she scanned the documents. "Central District access requires Level 3 clearance. You have Level 2. Her tone didn't change, but the word human when she spoke his species carried a sting. "Authorization insufficient. Entry denied." Jake leaned forward, his hand pressing against the counter. "These supplies are time-sensitive. You've got kids in that hospital who won't live long enough for me to chase some bureaucrat's stamp." "The regulations are clear," Kiara replied, her posture stiffening even further. "You cannot proceed without proper clearance. The regulations don't matter to a dying child." His voice dropped, rough with exhaustion and anger. "Look, Officer Nix, just let me through. No one has to know." Her eyes flicked up to his, sharp as blades. "I am the supervising officer, and the regulations are my duty. Step aside, next visitor." For a heartbeat, Jake considered it, raising his voice, throwing his weight around, forcing the issue like he had 100 times in uniform. But the war had taught him a truth. Sometimes battles couldn't be won. Sometimes you had to retreat and find another way. He swallowed his frustration, scooped up his rejected ID, and muttered, "Those kids deserve better than this." Something flickered across Kiara's face. Doubt, guilt, but it vanished in an instant. She repeated, "Next visitor." Jake turned away, the rejection burning like acid in his chest. He would find another way in. Smugglers. Black market routes. It would cost him more than he had, but what was the alternative? Let children die because some alien officer loved her rules more than life. His boots echoed on the polished floor as he neared the exit. That was when the world came apart. It began as a low rumble, a vibration that crawled up his spine. Then a roar split the air, deafening, metallic, final. The ceiling above the checkpoint screamed as steel supports bent and snapped. A cascade of sparks rained down. The floor shuddered like an earthquake. Screams erupted around him as beams tore free and a section of the roof collapsed. Jake spun, instinct kicking in, scanning the chaos. Aliens bolted for the exits. Guards barked orders, their composure cracking under the thunder of destruction. Dust choked the air, turning the world into a gray storm. And then he saw her. Officer Kiara Nix's station was gone, buried under a heap of twisted metal and rubble. Her polished console, her perfect uniform, her proud posture, all swallowed by debris. Without thinking, Jake dropped his duffel. "Someone's trapped back there," he shouted, though no one listened. The tide of panicked civilians surged past, desperate to escape. A guard tried to grab his arm. "The building's unstable. Evacuate now." "Not without her," Jake snapped, ripping free and plunging into the wreckage. The checkpoint groaned around him, every sound a promise of collapse. Sparks from severed conduits hissed like angry serpents. He clawed at jagged slabs of steel, ignoring the cuts opening on his hands. "Kiara, can you hear me?" A faint groan answered, muffled but real. Jake's heart slammed in his chest. "Hang on, I'm coming." He tore at the wreckage, muscles screaming, blood slicking his fingers. At last, a glimpse of blue skin showed through the dust. Her arm pinned beneath a beam thicker than his torso. Her markings flickered faintly, the alien equivalent of fatting consciousness. "Stay with me," he growled. He braced against the beam, adrenaline surging through his veins. His legs shook as he heaved upward, every tendon screaming. The beam lifted just enough. Kiara gasped, dragging herself free before the metal crashed down again. Jake scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her frame wiry but strong. Her head lolled against his chest, a nasty gash leaking purplish blood down her temple. "You," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Why?" "Talk later," Jake panted, dodging falling debris. "Right now we live." The exit yawned ahead, the night air spilling in. With every step, the building tried to kill them, collapsing panels, showers of sparks, another explosion ripping through the structure. He didn't stop. He didn't slow. He carried her until the open air hit his lungs like salvation. Behind him, the checkpoint collapsed in a roar of finality. Jake lowered Kiara onto the pavement as emergency responders swarmed. Medics rushed forward, their instruments flashing as they assessed her. But her eyes never left him, wide and unsteady. "You saved me," she murmured, as if the words were too heavy to believe. "After I denied you." Jake winced as pain from his own wounds finally caught up to him. His hands throbbed, bleeding freely. His shoulder burned from shrapnel, but he shrugged, voice simple and steady. "Helping's my duty, doesn't matter who." For the first time, her gaze softened. Something shifted in her markings, faint, subtle, but unmistakable. The rigid border officer was gone, replaced by someone who was seeing him truly for the first time. And in that moment, neither of them knew that this single act, one denied entry, one desperate rescue, would unravel the lies of a civilization and ignite a fire that could burn through empires. The emergency tent smelled of antiseptic, ozone, and fear. Sirens wailed outside as responders ferried the wounded from the collapsed checkpoint. Inside, medics swarmed between cots, their pale hands slick with blood, both crimson and violet. Jake sat on the edge of a portable examination table, his shirt peeled away to expose the shrapnel burn across his shoulder. A medic applied a cool layer of regenerative gel, the sting biting into his nerves. "You're fortunate these aren't deeper," the alien muttered, his four pupils blinking asynchronously. "Human skin is remarkably fragile." "Thanks for the anatomy lesson," Jake gritted out. He turned his head, eyes sweeping the tent until they found her. Officer Kiara Nix sat on a neighboring cot, her silver-white hair matted with dust and blood, a thick bandage wrapped across her temple. She was arguing with her medic in that clipped, authoritative voice that somehow still carried even when weak. "I don't need further observation," she insisted. "I need to return to my post." "There is no post to return to," the medic replied flatly. "The checkpoint is gone." For the first time since he'd met her, Jake saw her posture crack. Her shoulders slumped, the perfect rigidity collapsing under weight she could no longer hold. She glanced across the tent, her gaze colliding with his. For a heartbeat, the noise faded. She hesitated, then rose, swaying once before catching her balance, and crossed to him. She stopped just short of his table. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her markings betrayed her, pale streaks shifting in uncertain patterns. "The chief medic tells me," she began slowly, "that you refused treatment until they attended to me first." Jake shrugged. "You were bleeding worse than I was," seemed fair. "Our physiologies differ," she countered, though her voice lacked conviction. My blood volume is greater, my recovery faster. Well, nobody gave me the alien biology handbook, Jake replied, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Her markings flickered again, not anger, but something else. She tilted her head, studying him the way a hawk might study an unexpected prey. Then she lowered her voice. I've been authorized to conduct a preliminary investigation into the explosion. Investigation? Jake leaned forward. You're saying it wasn't an accident? Her pale eyes narrowed. Security footage suggests a planted device, professionally manufactured, military grade possibly, which raises a question: why target a border checkpoint, and why now? Jake's chest tightened. He remembered the last words he'd heard before being dragged into the tent: target the human courier. He didn't say it aloud, not yet. Instead, he asked, and my supplies, the medicine? Her lips pressed into a thin line, 60% destroyed in the blast. Jake swore under his breath, dragging a hand through his dust-caked hair. That's not just boxes, that's kids who won't make it through the week. Something passed over Kiara's face, not the cold mask of an officer, but the faintest flicker of concern, even guilt. You saved my life, she said carefully, almost as if the words themselves were sharp and dangerous. By the codes of my people, I am now in your debt. I don't keep score like that, Jake muttered. Nevertheless, I do, she said firmly. Her posture straightened again, the officer reassembling herself piece by piece. I have been granted temporary emergency authority to escort essential personnel into the Central District. I could classify you as such. Jake raised an eyebrow. What happened to regulations are clear. Her jaw tightened. This is not a change of heart. It is a practical solution. You need to deliver your remaining supplies. I need to investigate this attack, and I will balance my debt to you. Jake studied her for a long moment. For all her rigid formality, there were cracks in the armor now. He could see them, and he knew the truth. She didn't trust him, not yet. But she couldn't deny what had happened either. All right, he said at last. When do we leave? As soon as you're cleared for duty, she replied. Transport is already arranged. The transport pod hummed softly as it cut through the neon arteries of Anno's Prime. Through its transparent canopy, the city unfurled in concentric layers, the industrial grime of the outer rings giving way to the polished spires of the inner sanctum. Jake sat opposite Kiara. She was immaculate again, her uniform somehow restored to crisp perfection despite the bandage on her temple. Yet her eyes betrayed her. They kept drifting to him. You're starring, Jake noted after catching her gaze for the third time. I'm observing, she corrected, though her markings flushed with faint embarrassment. Humans are rare on Annos, especially in the inner rings. And what are you observing? She hesitated, then almost reluctantly. Your physical resilience, the way you lifted that beam, your strength was unexpected. Adrenaline, Jake explained. Human bodies pump it out when stressed, makes us stronger for a while, fight or flight we call it. Her brow furrowed in fascination. On my world, we're taught that humans are dangerous because of your unpredictability. Your emotions override logic. That makes you unreliable. Sometimes emotion's the better guide, Jake said quietly. Logic wouldn't have sent me back into that collapsing building. Her markings rippled softly. No, she admitted, it wouldn't have. For a moment, the air between them thickened with something unspoken. Then the pod slowed, approaching a security checkpoint between districts. Kiara reached for her identification. As she did, her hand brushed against his. A spark jolted through both of them. She withdrew quickly, her composure cracking. Sorry, she murmured. Don't be, Jake said softly. The checkpoint cleared them, and the pod slipped into the central ring. Towering spires of iridescent crystal rose around them, dazzling in the light of the system's star. Jake squinted at the sheer ostentation. Bit much, isn't it? He muttered. Kiara didn't answer. Her posture was rigid again, her eyes scanning the plaza ahead. Problem? Jake asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We're being followed. They exited the pod onto a broad promenade. The hospital loomed ahead, vast, elegant, shimmering with power. But in the mirrored surface of a tower, Jake caught it too, two tall, lean figures shadowing them. Their limbs were too long, their faces stretched and alert. Vexians. Friends of yours? Jake asked under his breath. Assassins, Kiara said grimly. Vexians rarely leave their system except for contracts. Someone with resources wants us stopped. The figures quickened their pace. Jake felt every muscle tighten, his instincts roaring to life. Act natural, Kiara whispered. There's a reflection point ahead. We confirm, then we. The whine of an energy weapon cut her off. A bolt of blue plasma sizzled past Jake's ear, leaving a smoking crater in the pristine wall. Run, Jake grabbed her hand, dragging her into a sprint. Bolts rained around them as they dove into a narrow service corridor. Drones buzzed overhead, scattering as plasma tore through them. Jake shoved Kiara behind a massive waste processor as shots peppered the metal. Your clearance better open that hospital door fast, he growled. Her composure cracked fully now, her voice raw with fear. It will if I can reach it. Jake scanned the corridor, calculating. The assassins were advancing, weapons steady. One mistake and they'd both be ash. I'll draw their fire, he decided. That's suicide, Kiara snapped, her markings flashing wild with alarm. Not if I make it quick, he met her eyes. You get that door open. She gripped his arm, her fingers surprisingly strong. If you die, my debt doubles. Guess you'd better make sure I don't. Before she could argue, he grabbed a piece of scrap metal and hurled it across the room. It clattered loudly, drawing the assassin's aim. Then he sprinted in the opposite direction, zigzagging as plasma bolts tore the air. One grazed his shoulder, fire ripping down his arm. He hissed but kept moving, diving behind cover, forcing them to split their shots. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Kiara sprint for the access door, her silver hair flashing like a beacon. The lock blinked red, then green. The door hissed open. Jake, she shouted, voice raw with urgency. Now. He broke cover, sprinting flat out as plasma bolts chased his heels. The assassins adjusted aim. One shot struck the wall inches from his head, spraying shards across his face. He dove. Kiara caught his arm, yanking him through the doorway. The door sealed with a hiss as a final bolt scorched its surface. They collapsed together in the sterile service corridor beyond, both gasping. Jake's shoulder throbbed, but he laughed anyway, breathless and reckless. That was close, he panted. Kiara's markings pulsed wildly as she stared at him. Then her hand pressed against his chest, over his hammering heart. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Why would you risk yourself like that, for me? Jake met her eyes, his voice low. Because it's what I do, it's what humans do. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, for the first time, the iron mask cracked. Her markings glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. And then she whispered words that froze him cold. These assassins, they weren't sent for me. They were sent for you. Cliffhanger, end of part 2. Jake stiffened. Me? Why the hell would they want me dead? Kiara's expression darkened. Because whatever you're carrying, those medical supplies, someone believes they threaten the entire foundation of Anno's society. The service corridor reeked of sterilizers and ozone. Its walls were smooth white panels broken by utility ports and flickering status lights. Jake leaned against the cold surface, cradling his scorched shoulder while his breath slowed. Kiara hovered close, her pale markings shifting like storm clouds across her cheeks. She still hadn't moved her hand from his chest. Supplies, Jake rasped, pushing away from the wall. We need to get the medicine to the kids before it's too late. Kiara's hand lingered for half a heartbeat longer before she drew back, her officer's mask snapping back into place. This way. The Central District Hospital rose like a cathedral of glass and iridescent alloy. Its spires glowed faintly, drawing power from conduits buried deep beneath the ring. Inside, everything gleamed, too perfect, too sterile, as if life had been engineered out of existence. They were met by a tall, slender alien in medical robes. His skin was a deeper blue than Kiara's, his markings intricate spirals that pulsed with authority. He studied Jake with thinly veiled curiosity. Officer Nix, he greeted, bowing slightly. And you must be the human courier. I am Dr. Renick, Chief of Pediatrics. Jake Mercer, Jake said, offering a hand out of habit. Renick hesitated, then accepted. His skin was cooler than a human's, his grip strangely delicate. Your timing is inconvenient, Renick admitted. 3 of our patients have entered critical stages. Every hour matters. Then let's move, Jake urged. He shoved the battered duffel onto a counter, opening its reinforced seals. Inside, the surviving crates of vials glimmered under their own faint bioluminescence. What's left isn't much, but it'll buy time. Renick's markings flickered with something like relief. Enough, perhaps, to stabilize them. Follow me. They passed through layers of security, until a transparent barrier revealed the children's ward. Jake stopped cold. There were 12 of them, young, too young, some barely old enough to walk, others in their equivalent of early adolescence. All shared the same blue-tinted skin as Kiara, though their markings varied in style and brightness. But none of them looked healthy. Some lay hooked to monitors, their small bodies trembling with fever. Others sat quietly, their eyes too big for their faces, their movements slow and weak. One girl, maybe 10 by human standards, was trying to build a tower of holographic blocks. Her hand shook so badly the shapes collapsed again and again. She looked up, her eyes tired but determined. Jake's throat tightened. War had shown him corpses by the hundreds, burned villages, massacres. But this, sick kids trapped behind glass, hidden from the world, hit harder than anything else. They keep them quarantined, Kiara murmured. Her voice was low, almost guilty. Officially for safety, but really to keep them hidden. Hidden from what? Jake demanded. Before Kiara could answer, Renick deactivated the barrier. They stepped inside. The air was cooler, quieter, filled with the soft hum of life support systems. The girl with the blocks looked up at Jake. Her pale markings pulsed faintly with curiosity. "You're human," she said simply. Her voice carried no prejudice, only wonder. Jake crouched beside her. "That's right, name's Jake." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "I'm Mira." Dr. Renick approached, holding a scanner. "Mira is the oldest. She helps the younger ones stay calm. She is extraordinary." "Doctor," Kiara said sharply, "the investigation. You said the explosion wasn't random. What do these children have to do with it?" Renick glanced at her, then at Jake. His markings rippled with hesitation. Finally, he gestured them toward a private consultation room. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Renick activated a privacy field. A faint shimmer filled the air. "What I am about to show you," he said gravely, "violates half a dozen central authority regulations. But after today's attack, I believe the truth can no longer be contained." He activated a holographic projector. Spirals of DNA rotated in the air, blue threads twisting and intertwining. "This," Renick explained, pointing to one sequence, "is standard Anno's genetic code." Another spiral appeared, sharper, simpler. "This is human DNA." Jake frowned. Different structures entirely, no compatibility. "Correct," Renick said. Then he brought up a third sequence. Jake's eyes widened. Even untrained, he could see it. Fragments of both patterns intertwined, spliced as if two puzzles had been forced together, yet forming something coherent. "This," Renick said softly, "is the genetic code of the children in that ward." Kiara went rigid. Her markings flashed bright and chaotic. "Impossible. Our species evolved in isolation. Genetic compatibility with humans it is not possible." Renick shook his head. "According to the official doctrine, yes, but these children are living proof. They are not anomalies. They are descendants, products of unions between human and Anno's ancestors." Jake blinked. "Hold on. Humans have only had official contact with Annos for 30 years. Renick's markings darkened. "Officially, but these markers go back at least 10 generations, which means—" Kiara's voice cracked as she finished it. "Humans and Annos once lived together." Renick nodded grimly. "And someone has gone to great lengths to erase that truth." The silence in the room was thick, heavy with implications. Jake's mind raced. A society built on purity, on rigid castes, and children who proved it was all a lie. "Wait," Jake said, connecting the dots. "The Proxima conflict. These kids, they're war orphans, right? Taken from the border worlds." Renick hesitated. His markings flickered guilt. "That is the official story, but I believe the attack that orphaned them was deliberate, a purge, designed to eliminate evidence of human Anno's integration." Jake's fists clenched. "So somebody is willing to kill children to protect their caste system." Kiara sat down abruptly, her posture collapsing. Her markings rippled with confusion, fear, even shame. "All my life I believed in the purity of our rings, that the closer one lived to the central district, the purer the blood. That was the foundation of our society. And now—" Jake softened his tone. "Now you know it's a lie." She looked at him, her pale eyes wide, raw. Everything I've ever enforced, every law I upheld. Renick turned off the holograms, his markings grave. And the explosion proves it. Someone powerful knows the children survived. They are trying to finish what they started. Jake leaned forward, his voice hard. Then we don't just have a delivery problem, we've got a war. The room fell silent. Then Kiara whispered almost to herself, Doctor, these genetic markers, if they are real, if they mean compatibility, would there be signs? Renick studied her, understanding dawned in his eyes. You've experienced something. Her markings flickered hot like an embarrassed flush. She shot a glance at Jake, quick, nervous, before turning back to the doctor. When close to him, reactions I cannot explain. Emotional, physical, they should not occur between species. Jake felt heat crawl up his neck. Are you saying? Renick's expression sharpened. He pulled out a handheld scanner, passing it over Kiara, then over Jake. The device beeped. He examined the results, and his markings blazed with shock. Extraordinary, he whispered. Officer Nix, your biochemistry is adapting to him. Your pheromone signatures are harmonizing. Kiara froze. What does that mean? Renick's voice dropped, reverent and almost fearful. It means that somewhere, deep in your genetic memory, your body recognizes his. Humans and Anos are not just compatible. They were once one people. Jake and Kiara stared at each other, the air between them thick with unspoken meaning. And then the intercom blared. Alert Director Thalon's special team en route. ETA 10 minutes. Renick's markings blanched. Thalon is one of the strongest advocates for caste purity if he learns the truth about these children. He'll kill them, Jake finished. Kiara rose to her feet, her markings flaring with sudden determination. Then we move them, tonight. The children's ward pulsed red with warning lights. Sirens wailed softly in the halls, a rising heartbeat of impending doom. Jake stood at the window, watching the convoy of sleek black vehicles slide to a stop outside the hospital. Doors hissed open. Armed escorts fanned out. And then he saw him. Director Thalon. Tall, lean, and sharp as a blade. His uniform gleamed pure white, a slash of power amid the gloom. His skin was a darker shade of blue than Kiara's, his facial markings intricate spirals that spoke of noble caste lineage. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the hospital facade like a predator sizing up prey. Damn it, Jake muttered. He's early. Dr. Renick's markings pulsed frantic warning. We'll never hold against him, not here. Then we don't hold, Jake said firmly. We move. Renick hesitated. The children are weak. Several won't survive without stabilization. They won't survive Thalon either, Jake snapped. You said there was another way out, a maintenance tunnel system. Renick swallowed. Old, unmaintained, dangerous. Better than waiting here to die. Jake turned to Kiara. She stood rigid, her markings alive with conflict. For the first time, she didn't look like a border officer. She looked like someone standing at the edge of betrayal of everything she had been taught. They're not just anomalies, she whispered. They're proof, and if Thalon takes them, that proof disappears. Her markings flared bright. She straightened, resolve snapping into place. We move now. Chaos in the ward. The children stirred as the alarm deepened. Mira, the oldest, instinctively herded the younger ones into a cluster. Her tired eyes flicked to Jake. What's happening? She asked. Jake crouched, lowering his voice. Bad men are coming. We're going to take you somewhere safe, but I need you to help keep everyone calm, all right. Mira's chin lifted, a child carrying the weight of something far heavier. I can do that. Good girl. Renick and two nurses began disconnecting life support tethers and transferring portable units into small harnesses. Jake scooped up a frail boy, his skin almost translucent, and slung him across his back. The boy's tiny fingers clutched his shirt. Kiara moved through the group, checking each child with surprising gentleness. Her voice was steady, commanding, but kind. The rigid officer was gone. This was something else, something closer to a protector. When the last child was secured, Renick gestured urgently. Supply room, rear access. The supply room. They crowded into the chamber, walls stacked high with crates of sterile packs and instruments. At the far end, a heavy door stood sealed, its surface etched with obsolete warning glyphs. Renick keyed in a sequence. With a groan of neglected machinery, the door creaked open to reveal a dark stairwell plunging downward. Service tunnels, Renick said. abandoned after the new transit system was built. Jake peered into the darkness. The air smelled of rust and damp stone. He adjusted the boy on his back. Lovely. Behind them, footsteps echoed in the hall. Kiara snapped her head toward the door they'd entered. Her markings flared in alarm. They're here. The confrontation. The supply room door hissed open. 4 figures in gray uniforms strode in, their posture too precise to be medics. Jake recognized soldiers in disguise the moment he saw them. At their center came Thalon himself. He paused just inside the doorway, surveying the scene with a slow, contemptuous smile. "Officer Nix," he drawled. "How disappointing. I expected better from border security, consorting with humans, aiding traitors. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done?" Kiara stepped forward, her spine straight. "With respect, Director, I understand perfectly. These children are not traitors, they are victims." Thalon's eyes narrowed. "They are evidence, evidence that will unravel everything we've built, and for that they cannot be allowed to live." Jake's fists clenched. "They're kids, not weapons. You'd kill them to protect your lie." Thalon's gaze flicked to him, disdain sharp enough to cut. "And here is the human, the courier, the anomaly. You should have been vaporized at the checkpoint. That bomb was insufficient." Jake's blood chilled, so it had been him. Thalon gestured lazily. "Take them." The soldiers advanced. The standoff. Jake moved without thinking. He grabbed a metal tray from a nearby counter and hurled it into the first soldier's face. The clang bought precious seconds. "Run," he barked. Renik shoved the children toward the stairwell. Kiara drew her sidearm, a compact stun pistol, and fired. Blue arcs of energy crackled through the air, dropping a soldier twitching to the ground. Another raised his weapon. Jake lunged, slamming his shoulder into the alien's chest. Pain flared down his wounded arm, but adrenaline drowned it out. He ripped the gun free and smashed it across the soldier's jaw. Kiara fired again, taking down a third. But Thalon didn't flinch. He stood in the doorway, markings dark with cold fury, as if he had already won. "You can't run forever," he said softly. "Every ring, every checkpoint, every surveillance drone will be hunting you." "Good," Jake spat, dragging the last child toward the stairwell. "Let them try." "Into the tunnels." They slammed the stairwell door shut just as plasma bolts scorched the wall. Jake heaved the heavy latch down. Sparks flew as a bolt burned through the metal. "Go," he urged. The stairwell plunged them into darkness. Their footsteps echoed, mixed with the soft sobs of frightened children. Portable lights flickered on, dim, weak, but enough to reveal endless pipes and rusted conduits. Renik led them into the tunnel system. The walls dripped with condensation, the air thick and stale. Distant echoes hinted at collapsed sections. Jake carried the boy in silence, his mind racing. They were fugitives now. Every authority in Anno's Prime would be after them. Beside him, Kiara kept pace, her pistol steady, her free hand guiding a younger child. Her markings glowed faint in the dark like embers. "You could still walk away," Jake muttered. "Say I forced you, save your career." Her head snapped toward him, eyes flashing. "I owe you my life, I owe them the truth. I will not walk away." For the first time, Jake believed her. The collapse. The tunnel stretched ahead, broken by ancient doors and silent machinery. The group moved as quickly as fragile bodies allowed. Then, without warning, the ceiling groaned. Dust rained down, the ground trembled. "Stop," Jake shouted. A section of the tunnel ahead buckled, then collapsed in a roar of stone and metal. A wall of debris sealed the passage. The children screamed. Renik's face blanched. That was the only direct route to the Fourth Ring Clinic. The others, they're blocked, flooded, or worse. Jake's jaw tightened. There's always another way. He scanned the wall of rubble, his soldier's mind already calculating. They didn't have explosives. They didn't have time. Behind them, faint echoes carried down the stairwell, pursuit. "We're boxed in," Kiara said grimly. Jake shifted the boy on his back, his voice hard. "Not boxed in, funneled. Whoever set this up wants us desperate, wants us to think there's no way out." "And," Kiara pressed. Jake's eyes narrowed at a faint draft slipping through the rubble, carrying the scent of open air. He set the boy down gently. "And they're wrong." Cliffhanger, end of part 4. Jake pressed his palm against the collapsed wall, feeling the cool draft. He turned to Kiara and Renik, his expression steel. "There's something on the other side," he said. "A way out, but if I'm right, it wasn't meant for us to find someone been using these tunnels recently." A child tugged at his sleeve, whispering with wide, fearful eyes. "They'll find us down here, just like they found my family." And in the distance, footsteps echoed closer. The tunnel breathed. That was the only way Jake could describe it. Each draft of cool air carried whispers through the rubble, hints of passageways beyond. He pressed his palm against the stone, feeling subtle vibrations that didn't belong in a sealed corridor. "Someone been here," he muttered. "Recently." Rennick's markings pulsed with alarm. Impossible. These service tunnels were abandoned centuries ago. Jake shook his head. Fresh air, footsteps in the dust, they're being used. Behind them, the echo of pursuit grew louder, boots striking stone in tight formation. Kiara raised her pistol, her posture taut. "Then we don't have long to find out who's down here with us." The detour. Jake scanned the collapse. Most of it was rock and bent alloy piping. But in the corner, he spotted a narrow gap, too small for an adult, but perhaps passable if widened. "Rennick, help me." He jammed his fingers into the debris, wrenching metal free. Pain flared in his torn hands, but he kept ripping until an opening widened enough for the smallest child to slip through. The boy Jake had carried earlier stared at the hole, eyes wide with fear. Jake crouched, his voice low and steady. "It's all right, kid. I'll be right behind you." The boy nodded weakly. Jake guided him through, then Mira, then the others, one by one. Rennick followed, coaxing those who were too weak to move on their own. Finally, Jake shoved his own body through the gap, shoulders scraping, his wounded arm screaming. Kiara was last, pistol clutched tight as she squeezed into the dark. The passage beyond was narrower, lined with old maintenance conduits. It sloped downward, the air cooler, damp. Jake exhaled. "We bought some time." Kiara shook her head. "No, we bought seconds. They'll be through the rubble soon enough." The forgotten transit. The passage twisted and opened suddenly into a cavernous chamber. Jake froze. A train station. Or what had once been one. The walls curved high overhead, etched with symbols half-worn by time. Tracks stretched into the distance, broken in places, half-flooded. Rusted support beams groaned with age. And yet the dust on the platform was disturbed. Boot prints. Supplies stacked in hidden alcoves, faint light from improvised lamps. "Someone been living here," Jake whispered. Rennick's markings flickered panic. "This isn't possible. The central authority sealed the old transit after the expansion." "Guess someone didn't get the memo," Jake replied grimly. A metallic click echoed from the shadows. "Don't move," a voice commanded. The outcasts. Figures emerged from the gloom, 4 of them weapons leveled. Their uniforms were mismatched, their markings rough and scarred, but their eyes were sharp. Jake raised his hands slowly, careful not to spook them. Kiara stepped in front of the children, her pistol aimed back in defiance. "Stand down," the lead figure barked. She was tall, with cropped hair the color of midnight and markings jagged like lightning across her face. "You've led soldiers here." "No," Jake said quickly. "We're running from them." She studied him, suspicion hard in her eyes. Then her gaze fell on Kiara. "Border security." Kiara stiffened. "Not anymore." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Explain now." Jake stepped forward, his voice steady. "We've got 12 sick kids, orphans from Proxima. Director Thalon wants them dead because they're proof of something he doesn't want the world to see. If you know these tunnels, you know what I'm saying is true." A tense silence, then the woman lowered her weapon. "Follow me quickly." The refuge below. They were led deeper into the station. Behind a half-collapsed wall, a hidden camp sprawled, crude but alive. Makeshift dwellings, jury-rigged power conduits, food stores, even children playing quietly in the dim glow of lamps. Outcast refugees, survivors. Jake's chest tightened. These weren't rebels. They were people who had fallen through the cracks of a rigid caste system that had no place for them. The woman turned, her gaze sharp. "Name?" "Lyra, ex-captain, Outer Ring Militia. When Thalon purged the border, we refused to bow, so we became ghosts." Rennick's markings pulsed with recognition. "I heard rumors, a resistance in the tunnels. I never believed." "You weren't meant to," Lyra cut him off. She gestured to the children. "These are the ones we've been waiting for." Jake frowned, waiting. Her expression hardened. proof that their lies are built on sand. The revelation. In a side chamber, Lyra activated a console salvaged from ancient systems. A hologram flared to life, showing genetic maps almost identical to those Renick had revealed. But these were older, archived data. 200 years ago, Lyra said, before the Purge, Anos and humans weren't enemies. We weren't even separate. We were one people. The Central Authority rewrote history, erased records, and destroyed anyone who remembered. We kept fragments, enough to know the truth. She looked at Jake, her expression almost reverent. You don't understand how rare you are, human. To them, you are a nightmare made flesh, proof they can't bury anymore. Jake's jaw tightened. I didn't ask to be anyone's proof. Lyra's gaze softened, but only slightly. Neither did those children. The decision. Shouts echoed distantly through the tunnels. Pursuers. Lyra turned sharp. They've tracked you, we can't stay. Renick looked desperate. The fourth ring clinic. Won't matter if Thalon captures them here, Lyra snapped. The council will never hear the truth. Kiara stepped forward, her markings flaring with determination. Then we take it to the council ourselves. Lyra blinked. What? We bring the children, the proof, directly into the chamber, force the truth into the light where Thalon can't bury it. Renick's markings pulsed in alarm. That's suicide. The council chamber is fortress guarded. Jake's voice was calm but steel. Yeah, but it's the only shot that matters. Lyra studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. There is a way. Old tunnels lead straight into the central spire. Dangerous, guarded, but if you're reckless enough, her eyes flicked to Jake, you might just make it. The pursuit. They began moving immediately. Lyra's people guided them into narrower tunnels, children bundled close, Renick carrying portable medical units. The air grew hotter, the walls vibrating with the hum of the city above. Behind them, the echo of boots grew louder. Plasma fire cracked through the tunnels, searing the stone. Jake shoved Mira behind cover, returning fire with the weapon he'd stolen earlier. Go, he shouted. Get them moving. Kiara grabbed his arm. Don't get yourself killed. Jake grinned grimly, not planning to. He leaned around a corner, squeezing off shots. A soldier fell. Another pressed forward. Plasma bolts sparked against the walls, scorching the air. Beside him, Kiara fired, her precision deadly. Their movements synced without thought. Cover, return fire, advance. For a moment, it felt like they'd fought together for years. But there were too many. The sacrifice. A tunnel split ahead. Lyra gestured sharply, this way. Her people herded the children down the side passage. Jake and Kiara covered the rear. Plasma bolts rained closer, forcing them back step by step. Renick stumbled, nearly dropping a medical unit. Jake grabbed him, hauling him upright. Move, Doc. The old scientist's eyes blazed with unexpected fire. They'll never stop, not until these children are gone. Then we don't stop either, Jake growled. Another blast shook the tunnel, collapsing part of the ceiling between them and their pursuers. For a moment, blessed silence. Then a new sound, the low, mechanical whine of something bigger than rifles. Kiara's face drained of color. They've brought heavy ordnance. Jake swore, they're planning to bury the whole damn tunnel. The tunnel shook with the thunder of approaching steel. Dust sifted down in sheets as the ground vibrated beneath their feet. The purge unit stepped into view. It was a monster, 8 feet tall, plated in black alloy, its limbs jointed like a predator insect. 2 cannons swiveled from its shoulders, glowing with plasma charge. Its sensor array rotated, locking onto heat signatures. One by one, its weapons hummed alive. Renick's markings blanched. Those machines were decommissioned after the purge, there. Guess someone forgot to tell this one. Jake cut him off, raising his stolen rifle. The first plasma bolt ripped past his head, scorching the wall. The shockwave threw him against the stone. He rolled, gasping, as debris rained around them. Move the kids, Jake barked, dragging himself up. Lyra's outcasts scrambled, ushering the children down a side passage. Renick followed, carrying the weakest. Kiara remained. She stood beside Jake, pistol raised, her markings blazing in furious defiance. You're insane if you think we can kill that, she hissed. Jake spat blood, grinned, and chambered a new charge. I've killed worse. The first clash. The purge unit advanced, each step a quake. It fired again. Plasma scorched across the tunnel, slicing through a support beam. The ceiling groaned. Jake fired 3 quick bursts. The rifle hissed uselessly against the machine's armor, leaving shallow burns. "Great," he muttered. "It's a walking tank." Kiara's pistol snapped, sending arcs of blue electricity into its sensors. The machine flinched, its targeting array sparking. Jake's eyes narrowed. "You can blind it." "Not for long," she warned, already reloading. The machine's cannons roared. The blast seared past Jake, close enough to blister his skin. He dove, sliding across the stone, coming up firing. The purge unit swung, metal claws snapping open. "Jake," Kiara shouted. He rolled as the claw slammed down where he had been, the impact shaking the tunnel. He scrambled behind a rusted pipe cluster, heart hammering. "This thing's not designed for tunnels," he gasped. "Too bulky." His eyes flicked upward, pipes, steam valves, conduits, but tunnels are designed for pressure. "The plan," Jake shouted across the noise. "Kiara, draw its fire." Her markings flared disbelief. "That's not a plan." "It's my plan," he roared back. She snarled, but her pistol barked again, crackling arcs lighting the dark. The machine's head swiveled, weapons locking onto her. Jake sprinted along the wall, ducking behind machinery, searching desperately. There, a valve, half-rusted, marked with old glyphs. Cool air hissed faintly from the seam, pressurized coolant. He slung the rifle, braced himself, and heaved the valve. It screeched, unmoving. He gritted his teeth, muscles straining, blood slicking his palms. With a scream of metal, the valve broke free. A jet of freezing vapor blasted across the tunnel, striking the purge unit's leg. Frost spread instantly across the alloy, slowing the massive limb. "Kiara, now!" Her pistol snapped again, electricity arcing into the frozen joint. The metal shattered, one leg buckling. The machine roared, staggering sideways. But it wasn't done. It fired both cannons at once. The blasts hit high, collapsing part of the ceiling. Debris crashed between Jake and Kiara, separating them. "Jake," she screamed, dust choking her voice. "I'm fine," he shouted back, coughing. "Keep shooting." The close fight. The purge unit shifted, dragging itself upright despite the shattered leg. It fired again, the blast carving a molten scar in the wall. Jake ducked into a side alcove, panting. His rifle was nearly out of charge. His hands shook from exhaustion and blood loss. And yet he smiled, a reckless, desperate grin. He spotted another pipe cluster above the machine, thick with pressure lines. He slung his rifle over his shoulder, grabbed a jagged shard of metal, and began climbing. The pipes groaned under his weight, shaking violently. The purge unit's sensors turned upward, locking onto him. Its cannons swiveled. Kiara saw it. Her markings flared bright with terror. "Jake, get down." "No time," he shouted. The machine fired. The blast tore through the pipes inches from him, heat searing his side. He almost fell, but drove the shard deep into the pipe with a grunt. The line ruptured. A torrent of superheated steam blasted downward, engulfing the purge unit's head. Its sensors fried instantly, sparks flying. The machine convulsed, cannons firing wildly into the ceiling. Jake dropped, landing hard beside it. He grabbed his rifle, jammed the barrel under its plating, and fired point-blank until the charged cell burned dry. The machine shuddered, then collapsed in a thunderous heap. Silence. Aftermath. Jake staggered upright, chest heaving. His skin was raw, his arm useless, his hands bleeding, but he was alive. The debris shifted. Kiara scrambled through, dust covering her uniform, her eyes wide. "You reckless idiot," she snapped, voice breaking. She grabbed his face with trembling hands, scanning him for wounds. Her markings blazed so bright they glowed in the dark. "You could have died." "But I didn't," he rasped with a grin. She punched his shoulder gently for once. Then she pulled him into a fierce embrace. Her forehead pressed against his, the intimate gesture of her people. Her voice was raw, almost a whisper. "I don't care about regulations anymore. I care about you." Jake froze, then slowly he wrapped his arms around her. For a moment, the world shrank to just them. The choice. Lyra and her outcasts returned, wide-eyed at the ruined purge unit. The children huddled behind her, staring in awe at the smoldering wreck. Renick whispered, almost reverent, "Human ingenuity, adaptability, recklessness. No machine is designed for that." Jake wiped soot from his face. Machines don't matter. What matters is getting these kids to the council chamber before Thalon finds another way to kill them. Lyra's expression hardened. The spire tunnels are close, but once we enter them, there's no turning back. Kiara's markings glowed softly as she looked at Jake. Then forward is the only direction left. Jake met her gaze. His smile was grim but steady. Let's go change a world. Cliffhanger end of part 6. As they began moving again, Renick pulled Jake aside, his markings pale with dread. You don't understand, he whispered. If we bring the children into the council chamber, if the truth is revealed, society won't just bend, it will break. Jake's jaw tightened. Then it's time to break it. Above them, the spire loomed, its lights glittering through cracks in the ceiling, a beacon of hope and danger. And in the shadows of the ruined tunnel, a surviving purge unit sensor blinked faintly, transmitting. The tunnels narrowed as they climbed. Ancient conduits thrummed underfoot, carrying the lifeblood of the city toward the central spire. Each step forward was harder, children shuffling, Renick gasping under medical packs, Jake's burned shoulder screaming. But ahead, light spilled through a grated opening. Real light, the spire's heart. Lyra crouched by the grate, prying it open. This is it, she whispered. Council chambers sublevel, security is tight. Once we step out, every eye in Annos will be on us. Jake adjusted the boy on his back, sweat running down his temples. Good, let them watch. Kiara touched his arm. Her markings glowed faintly, softer now, like firelight instead of lightning. Jake, if we fail, they'll call this treason. You'll be executed, I'll be. He cut her off, voice low but steady. Then we don't fail. The chamber. The council chamber was vast, a circular cathedral of glass and stone. 12 towering seats encircled the floor, each occupied by a counselor draped in ceremonial robes. The air shimmered with holographic projections of law and order, glowing like chains. Director Thalon stood near the center, white uniform gleaming, his markings alive with righteous fury. Counselors, he thundered. A terrorist act has been committed, security outposts destroyed, children abducted, and at the heart of it, a human smuggler aided by a traitor officer. Gasps rippled through the chamber. All eyes turned as Jake, Kiara, Renick, and Lyra emerged from the shadows with the children. The room froze. Not abducted, Jake's voice rang out hard and clear. Rescued. The truth unveiled. Thalon's face twisted. Seize them. But Counselor Ara, the eldest among the 12, her markings intricate as woven silk, raised a hand. Wait, explain yourself, human. Jake stepped forward, every step heavy but certain. He gestured to the children huddled behind Mira. These kids are survivors of the Proxima conflict. Thalon calls them anomalies, abominations, but they're not, they're proof. Renick activated a projector. Genetic sequences spiraled into the air, glowing like fireflies. Human, Annos, and between them the impossible third strand, the children's code. Proof, Renick said, voice trembling, that humans and Annos are not separate, that we share a past, that we once lived as one people. The chamber erupted. Some counselors shouted denial. Others stared in shock, their markings flickering uncontrollably. Kiara stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. All my life I believed in purity and the sanctity of rings, but when I saw these children, when I saw the lengths our leaders would go to erase them, I understood. Purity is a lie, and lies can no longer govern us. Her markings blazed with conviction. The conspiracy exposed. Thalon's composure cracked. His markings pulsed wild with fury. You fools, if this truth spreads, society collapses, order collapses, everything we built will burn. Jake glared at him, then let it burn. Thalon snapped his fingers. From the chamber's edges, armed soldiers stepped forward. Weapons charged, aimed squarely at Jake and the children. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Mira stepped forward, just a child, trembling but unyielding. She raised her small voice, carrying clear across the chamber. My blood is yours, my life is yours. Why are you afraid of me? The silence that followed was deafening. Counselor Ara rose slowly from her seat. Her markings rippled in sorrow and shame. Because they built their power on fear, child, and fear dies in the face of truth. She turned on Thalon, her voice sharp as a blade. Enough. The fall of Thalon. Thalon roared, markings blazing crimson. He drew a weapon from his cloak, leveling it at Mira. Jake moved without thought. He lunged, placing himself between the barrel and the girl. A shot cracked, searing heat rushing past his ribs. He gasped, staggered. Kiara's scream split the chamber. Jake. She raised her pistol, fired one clean shot. Energy slammed into Thalon's chest. He collapsed, markings flickering, eyes wide with rage and disbelief as life bled out of him. The chamber erupted in chaos. Soldiers hesitated, leaderless. Counselors shouted over one another. Counselor Ara's voice cut through it all. "Stand down. By council decree, Director Thalon is relieved of command. His crimes, his purges, his lies will be investigated in full. These children will be protected." The aftermath. Hours blurred into exhaustion. The children were moved under council protection. Lyra's outcasts were granted amnesty, their existence acknowledged for the first time. Jake sat on a bench outside the chamber, his shirt torn, bandages wrapped around his side. His head hung low, every muscle screaming. Kiara sat beside him. She didn't speak at first. She simply leaned, pressing her forehead gently to his, the gesture now so familiar it hurt. "You almost died again," she whispered. Jake managed a weak grin. "It's kind of my thing." Her markings glowed softly, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. "Reckless, irrational, illogical," her voice broke, "and I've never trusted anyone more." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. A new dawn. The next day, the city awoke to broadcasts unlike any before. Genetic sequences displayed in public squares. Images of human and Anno's children side by side. Reports of Thalon's purge exposed. The lie was broken. There was fear, anger, but also hope. Jake and Kiara stood together on a balcony overlooking the central plaza, the sun rising over the spires. Renick joined them, his expression weary but resolute. "This is only the beginning. The road ahead will be chaos." Jake exhaled slowly. Sometimes chaos is what a world needs. Kiara turned, her pale eyes locking with his. "And what do you need, Jake Mercer?" He studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "A partner if you're willing." Her markings flared bright, radiant. She took his hand without hesitation. Epilogue. 6 months later. A transport ship cut through the void, earthbound. Inside, laughter echoed from the children's ward, Mira and the others playing, healthier, stronger. Jake stood at the viewport, Kiara at his side. Her silver hair shimmered in starlight, her hand warm in his. "You still think I should have denied you at the border?" she asked quietly. Jake chuckled. "Best rejection I ever had." She smiled, her markings glowing like dawn. "Then let's never stop breaking their rules." Together they watched the stars unfold. Two people once divided by walls, now united by choice. Not anomalies, not lies. But proof. Proof that humanity, no matter the world, was the spark that turned borders into bridges.